We all go through suffering in our lives. We all go through these periods where it just seems like it's we're just nothing but pain in some form, whether it's an emotional pain or a physical pain, and in some cases spiritual pain, and we don't ever fully understand why we're going through what we are going through. And I've seen people go through sufferings from losing loved ones, losing a child, losing parents, losing spouses, to death, to divorce. And it is, especially in our own day and age, we have this whole thing of, it seems like our children are encouraged, if you disagree, if your parents are trying to teach you something or believe in something that is contrary to what is being taught, then it's okay to disown them. If they're against your personal beliefs, it's okay to disown your parents. And I can understand it to a point where if it's a very unhealthy relationship with your parents, like I have friends that I disagree with on a lot of different topics, everything from religion to politics, and we're still friends. We still talk to each other. We'll still have coffee together. And to me, that is, but we don't disown each other. And we're able to look past those issues. But unfortunately, we're in an age now where you're not allowed to look past certain issues. But if anything, what happens is people are are put into these positions where it's this rhetoric of hate. And that's actually, I don't want to get into that. That's a topic for some other day. That's not really what I want to talk about. I do want to talk about suffering and how the things that we do suffer through on a daily basis. And as I said before, it can be anything from an emotional pain, physical pain, spiritual pain. But when it comes to, we always ask ourselves, God, or should I say, we ask God all the time, why are you putting me through this? Why do I have to go through this? Well, there's a variety of different reasons why you might be going through some suffering. Maybe you did do something wrong. Okay? I am more than willing to tell people all the time the things that I'm going through in my life, the pain, the depression that I harbor, is a result of my own stupid decisions. Okay? I made decisions in my past, particularly in my 20s, that I am suffering with today. Okay, it were decisions that I made, and I have to own that. Okay, but there's other things that have happened that I never asked for. Maybe it was a disease. I remember as a kid, I broke my arm. I had to suffer for like half a summer, and literally in a body cast. The doctor. He was an old guy, and I guess he grew up in the age where broken, you were out. It was basically a body cast, and the bone broke right here on impact. Of course, it also slid over. It was a nice clean break, and because I also slid a bit, it got pushed up. So what happened was when they got the bone in place, because it was actually right down here, I was in a body cast like this for like half the summer. It just happened in late May, I think, and it was almost to the end of June before I got my cast off. And because I was in a body cast, as soon as we of course, bathing was a bit of a challenge, and so I didn't. Of course, that was. We could say that it was my fault, but at the same time, it was just, trying to catch up with a friend on a bicycle. I hit a rock and went over the handlebars. That's kind of what happened. But my mom, had to suffer with that too, because, well, body cast, that means no bathing for 6 weeks. Yeah. Oh, my mom was, the day that cast came off, we made a direct. I think maybe we stopped at McDonald's to get something to eat, but other than that, it was straight line home. Mom was like, bath now. So there was some suffering there, and but what about the other stuff? You live a healthy life. You do all the things you're supposed to do, and you get diagnosed with some horrible disease like cancer. You keep meticulously checks on your finances. I mean, you're so meticulous with it. Your budget is perfect, and you go, you invest properly, you do everything you're supposed to do, but then all of a sudden also one day, either somebody hacks into your account or the whole stock market just crashes and you lose everything. You didn't ask for it. You did everything right, but you still lost. You still have to suffer. Okay, and it probably was not anything you did personally. And the same goes on with death. I mean, we always ask ourselves, why did somebody have to die? Why did this person have to leave me now? Why did these things happen? Okay, it was nothing you did. It may not have been so much anything that person did. It was just their time. So here's the thing about suffering, and especially in the Christian worldview, is suffering is a good thing. It really is. Suffering can be a good thing. And if you go into the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 3, it reads this. Sorry, guys, I got new glasses on, so this is I'm making some adjustments. Okay. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and that endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm trying to... That is the ESV, or the English Standard Version. That is what I use. Haven't always used it, but it is so interesting that it actually reads that we rejoice in our sufferings. Now, what a lot of these sufferings that is talking about is being that of a Christian, and Christians, even to this day, are suffering all around the world. There are countries where Christianity is outlawed. Living in America, living in a Western society, we don't ever think about that. We never think about what goes on in foreign countries in the name of Christ, because we're so advanced here. Okay, we accept, in America, we basically accept nearly every religion as long as it doesn't involve some sort of human sacrifice. We really do. Let's be honest. We really do. And, you can, and, we kind of forget what suffering really means as a Christian, although we're starting to get a little bit of a taste of it, where it seems like every religion in the world is being praised here in America, but the moment you bring up Christianity, it's a completely different situation. Okay, the moment I bring up Jesus Christ, I'm attacked. How dare you suffer? There was a channel that I listened to, and I can't remember what the whole topic was. They were talking about something going on in society, and I think he was talking about, how losing hope and everything, and I brought it up, there is hope in Jesus Christ. And I put in the comments. Next thing I know, the same content creator put down, well, there's other ways, there's other religions out there other than just Christianity. There's others out there. I'm like, oh, really? It's just an attack. It was never a, yeah, you're right, although I disagree with you, you're right. It was an attack, a little bit of an attack. Okay? I didn't suffer for it. I didn't lose sleep that night over it, although I did say a prayer for him. But what goes on is the fact that we live a very sheltered life here in the United States. I know in Canada, I've actually met some people in Canada who, if they preach against certain sins in Canada, the preachers, those who are speaking out against these certain sins, they can be carted away. They can go to jail, or they'll be fined. It's England right now. This is utterly ridiculous. A few months ago, I was reading that there was this, people who lived within a certain radius of certain facilities, certain medical facilities. Like I said, I'm trying to, because of the YouTube algorithm, I'm trying to, be kind of not directly say what all this is, because I want you to be able to get this. But there are certain medical facilities there that they basically set notices to people who live within a certain radius that they are not allowed to pray. They don't want them to. They're not allowed to pray, especially for the people who are going in and out of these facilities. My whole question I've always asked and wondered is what is the big deal about prayer unless they understand its power, unless they fully understand the power that goes into prayer. Now, the other thing I want to think about is I'm going to bring up a couple of Bible characters, especially in the book of Daniel, that who gone through certain these kind of sufferings. If you read, I've loved the book of Daniel ever since I was a kid. When I was a really young kid, I was just fascinated with the story of Daniel in the lion's den. And I didn't write these down in my notes. I'm shooting from the hip on this one. But, early in the book of Daniel, you have the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who, when they were told by the king that they needed to kneel before this statue, I don't know if it's a statue that of himself or was some other pagan god that they had, they refused. And he's like, if you don't bow down before this idol that I built, that's the whole thing. He built it. If you don't bow down to this idol, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And they're like, okay, praise, you are the king, we honor you as king, but we're not going to betray our God. And so he even had the fire in that furnace, fired up even more and make sure that they were killed. And if you know the story, 3 young Hebrew men went in, but when they looked into it to see what was happening to them, there was four walking around. And that is quite powerful. They went through that suffering just to come out at the end of it. And it's the same with Daniel. If you remember, King Darius of the Chaldeans, he actually made it wasn't him so much, but all these other advisors and kind of coerced him into making a law that would, anybody who prays to any other god but him as the king, they should be thrown into the lion's den. And he was just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, I can get that. I'm the king. But what he didn't realize, it was a law to basically, because they knew Daniel was not going to stop praying to his God, and he was really a friend of the king. And because the king made this decree, he could not go back on it, especially when he knew that it was, that Daniel was the one who was going to have to be executed. If you remember that whole story, I mean, that's a bit of a suffering right there. If you think about it, just facing a certain death, that is a suffering all on its own. But if you remember the end of that story, what did he say when he was pushing Daniel into it? If you're basically the king basically said was, if your God is real, then I know he's going to spare you, and I'll be back here first thing in the morning to let you out. And the king was true to his word. He got there. They opened up the mouth of the den. There was Daniel. And I always imagined Daniel just sitting there and chilling with the cats. And Daniel told the story about how his God sent an angel down to shut the mouth of the lions. That's a phenomenal story. Of course, they pulled Daniel out and they pushed, all those advisors that tricked him to making this law. He threw them in, and the lions didn't even wait for these people to hit the ground. They're getting a little dry, sorry. So if you've, in these stories that I just told you, something happened. Okay, yes, they went through suffering. They were thrown into probably before these moments of execution, they were probably thrown in jail, and then they were taken to execution. Okay? But they remained faithful. They knew death was coming. They knew if God wanted them to live, that they were going to live. And you know what? God came through with it. So just going through that, just coming through those ordeals, something happened. If you go through, continue reading through these verses that I just told you, that's Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. First of all, they went through the suffering. They were persecuted. They went, and what happened was while going through that, they got stronger. Okay? He goes, if you think about it, look, they went through it. They came out of it. They knew God's grace. They knew God's power even more. Okay? This was not just now stories or lessons that they were taught as a child. They went through it and they came out of it by God's grace. God strengthened them. They gave them the endurance. You know what? If you go, I've heard these endurance tests, these endurance races. It's basically to see how tough you are to get through one. And if you get through the training, if you know you went through the proper training, you got the strength to go through whatever these trials are. Okay? So when you go through suffering, when you go through a trial or a tribulation like that, and you come out on top, guess what? You were just made stronger. And through that strength, you're going to have more of a build of character. Okay? And what I mean by that is, and I don't know, I kind of question the word character, but you got an experience. You got a knowledge. It's like, I went through something, and now if something else comes my way, I know I can get through that. All right? Or at least I know what I have to do to build more strength, or to build more knowledge to continue going. And with that comes hope. All right? So when we're going through our lives and these trials and tribulations come through, and the suffering comes our way, and things happen to us, we know we have the strength or the patience to endure it. We know we have the knowledge and the ability to accept what is coming our way, and that we can deal with it, and we can deal with the situation. And with that comes hope, because now we know at the end of it there's a huge reward coming our way, and that reward is in Jesus Christ. Okay, and I don't know what I really have to do. If you go through the book of Revelation, I've always referred to Revelation as a living book. And when I was in Bible college, this is a little extra. We had we taught, Revelation was taught very differently than probably a lot of the other denominations. Well, I don't consider myself part of any denomination. I'm just a Christian. I follow the Bible. That's the end of it. But the thing that I was taught is the things that happened in the book of Revelation began right there while John was on the Isle of Patmos, because of one phrase that was said, that these things are at hand. Like my coffee mug right here is right here. It's right here by me. It's nearby. It's, I can put my hand on it. And I believe a lot of those events were happening then. They were in a figurative language, because if you think about it, John was on an island under Roman control, and these were documents that he was going to have to send out to get past Roman authorities. And it had to be in a language that the Romans were going to look at and say, okay, this is a bunch of gibberish. He's talking about crowns and dragons and serpents and a city in the sky and so on and so forth. So yeah, we'll let these go and let the Christians, see what kind of a fool their last apostle really has become. But it being in a figurative language, I firmly believe that the Christians, when they read it, they knew what was going to be happening. And that's me. We can have an argument about it. It's, I'm not going to sit here and, but it was something that, to me, that a revelation that happened to me when I was in that class of Revelation, believe it or not, kind of ironic, was Revelation is a living book. And so with that, and I'm looking through it and seeing what happens at the end of the book, the last few chapters, creates a whole dynamic of hope. That there is something great, wonderful, and beautiful that is coming our direction. Now, with that being said, so if you're sitting here and you're just thinking to yourself, well, I'm suffering, this is not fair. First of all, as I just said, remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. Read the book of Daniel, okay? They went through some suffering. If you really want to get into it, read the book of Job, okay? And before I go, that is something right there. If you're worried about your suffering, the suffering you're going through, you specifically remember that here was a man who really did nothing wrong in the eyes. Really, he did nothing wrong in the eyes of God. God even admits that, and he allowed Satan to go ahead, have at it. And part of it was to prove a point to Satan. The other thing was to prove a point to other people that, I will reward those who keep their trust in me no matter what. And that's what, to me, that's the whole premise of the book of Job. Was, if you think about it, Job went through that, and yes, he went through a period of doubt. He was just in his head. He was just like, "This is, I've lost everything," and really, he kind of did. He lost his, literally, he lost his children were killed. He lost all of his wealth. He lost all of his animals, and he lost his health. And that wasn't even the worst part. His wife, his partner, the person who should have been right there saying, "Don't quit. Don't give up on God. God, there's a reason for this." She basically just looked at him and said, "Curse God and die." That is what she did. And I think to many of us, if our spouse, our significant other said that to us, we would be utterly devastated. That would probably be the final straw. And even his friends, when they, those who are coming forth that you would think would be giving him moral support, were basically questioning him and doubting him, trying to convince him that he did something wrong. Which, I'm sorry, but that, absolutely, that was, some great friends right there. Anyways, oftentimes there's a reason for suffering, okay? There's a reason why sometimes we have to go through a physical disease like cancer, or something, you go through a season of depression. You don't understand why. You don't understand what's going on. Loss of finances. Loss of, maybe you did everything right in a marriage, but that other person, I when it comes to marriage and divorce, I tell people all the time, it takes two people to build a marriage, but it takes one person to knock it down. Okay? And that's the end of it. That's the bottom line. So, what's it going to be? So, when suffering comes your way and you have to go through this period of tribulation, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there, wallow in the mud, and cry about it? Or are you going to stand up, put your adult pants on, and just keep pushing through it, knowing at the end of it there's going to be a reward? And I'm going to talk more about this. This is kind of a bold, really large subject to talk about, and I'm going to do like another part of this next week. So, and by the way, this was supposed to be posted last week. I actually even did go ahead and post it on YouTube, and I got to listen to it and realized I didn't really like it. So I deleted it and I'm redoing it. But next week there's going to be a part 2 to this, maybe I don't know if it's a part 2, but they're going to be tied together. So until next time, God bless, and give glory to God.